Adventure Time is one of those shows to where, as you watch it, there is this feeling of warmth and wholesomeness, even though it's supposed to be a show that represents the exact opposite, but it's still able to retain its adventurous and wild theme, with the wholesome and pure aspect of the show enhancing one's experience of the show. In Adventure Time, there aren't many fathers that stand out or even exist as just good fathers overall, but Joshua is the only depiction of a father that is tolerable to say the least. Although Joshua isn't the nicest and loving father of them all, he is still a father that cares greatly for his kids. And in this video, I explain why. Jake and Finn's dad, Joshua, hasn't really been on screen as much, but when he is on screen, there's always an important role that he plays that further advances the characters of both Finn and Jake. Joshua alongside his wife Margaret are different in their ways of parenting, with Margaret being more caring and nurturing, whereas Joshua is a lot more tough and exigeant in his display of love, where he just wants to toughen up his children for them to be ready for the real world. But he has his moments where he discards those methods and just embraces his children for who they are without reason. In the season 6 episode, Joshua and Margaret Investigations, it is made well aware to the audience that it's Jake's birthday, as we see Finn and BMO dancing as he's gassing Jake up. It's so cool to see how close the characters are with each other, to where they spend their most important moments together, being involved in each other's life. It brings me back to how endearing this show was back in the day, and this is the 6th season, so I'm glad that the show didn't lose its initial touch of being wholesome. As they're vibing out together, Finn sparks the question of how Jake was born, with Jake responding with him not knowing, but recounts a story that his parents told him, and we get a flashback to Jake's parents as we see that Margaret is pregnant, and us as the watchers immediately believe that Jake would be the baby that is being conceived, but the writers play the long game of Margaret still not being due for labor, even though the baby is kicking, stringing us along for the ride that would inevitably occur in this episode. And so Joshua appears constantly urging Margaret to take it easy, being pregnant, but Margaret refuses to stay still, and we see where Jake gets his hunger for adventure from, with despite being pregnant, she can't be stationary. Then Joshua suggests for them to go on a low-stake investigation, as both are detectives, and so Joshua decides to solve the case regarding tree trunks, as she reported that her pies have gone missing, and we see that the culprit is actually her husband Wyatt. And dude's design is just wow, because what is that? Alright, and so then Joshua writes it off that there is no monster, but Tree Trunks disagrees, believing that there is a bigger threat behind this, which sets the plot of the episode. So Margaret takes to her warning and goes in search, following the footprints of the monster. And we see that Joshua is really worried about Margaret, and it just goes to show how good of a husband Joshua is, really looking out for both his wife and unborn child. Then we see that both face off against this shape-shifting monster, and pay attention to the word I just used here, shape-shifting. It's going to play a very important part of the episode later on. So as the married duo encounters this monster, the monster just proves difficult to take on because it is able to shapeshift into different animals, and this level of skill can give Beast Boy a run for his money because he's just so good at with his abilities and whatnot. So unfortunately, the monster gets a hold of Joshua and bites him, leaving him infected with this parasite-like condition. And so we see that the two retreat back home. And the episode establishes that this bite wasn't like your ordinary bite, as we see Joshua undergo this poisonous state where his health just deteriorates over time. And even in this state, Joshua still worries about Margaret, not wanting her to harm herself or the baby. Just showing, like I said before, how good of a father and husband he is. So Margaret decides to venture in search of that monster to contain the venom in order to cure Joshua. Jake had some endearing and cool parent for sure, and so Margaret locates the same monster, and we get this smooth fight sequence between them. And for a show that came out in the early 2010s, the animation was pretty solid with the fluidity of the movement, and this show really mastered the usage of squash and stretch in each character motion, really cherishing the cartoon element of the show. Then we see that the Margaret gets one over on the monster, taking the venom, and we get this scene where she apologizes to the monster, showing that she is kind-hearted, not having that intent to kill. Then we cut back home to Joshua as his bite mark pulsates simultaneously, and Margaret prepares for labor, and we see that the mark explodes and a small Jake appears out of it. And then we cut back to Margaret as her baby is also born. So then we see both Margaret and Joshua walking down the park later on as they both embrace their new roles as parents. As we see both babies, Jake and Jermaine, and we see that Margaret worries about Jake and if he'll be, addressed as their kid, not knowing what he truly is. But Joshua brushes her aside, acknowledging Jake as their son, no matter the method of his birth. This goes to show how good of a father Joshua is, to where he even doesn't care about Jake not being his biological son, but he still views Jake as his son, due to how at the end of the day, Joshua still gave birth to Jake, cementing him as his own son. This episode really opened my eyes to how, good of a dad Joshua is, even though, yes, we didn't really see him be a dad, because we know that he didn't have Jake nor Jermaine yet. So we just get to see him pre-dad role or pre-father role, but we see him more as a husband in this episode, on how he's just constantly worrying about Margaret and her not getting her, and him just caring for her so much, to where he even though he is injured, and even though he is not feeling his best and not at the top of his health, he's still worrying for Margaret, even sacrificing himself for her. That's how he even got that mark in the first place. So even though this episode didn't really show how he was a good father, it did show how good of a husband he was to Margaret, and he is to Margaret. So yeah, man. The dynamic between Jake and Joshua is one thing, but I want to further dive into the dynamic between both Joshua and Finn, because we don't really get to see too much of their relationship. And so when we do get moments with them together, or at least regarding them together, it is clear that their relationship is made more for us as the watchers to string together, as seen from the episode Dad's Dungeon. Where it starts with Jake, Finn, and BMO, and then partaking in classic tomfoolery as they stumble across a hidden hologram message of their dad Joshua, as he encourages them to find a dungeon that he built specifically for Finn. And the episode really makes Jake suffer for a little while, as he knows the truth behind the dungeon being created due to the father, Joshua, building it for Finn in order for him to toughen up. We see that Jake is unable to stomach this task of telling his brother and best friend that he's weak. And it's as they pass through the dungeon, Jake finally decides to not hide the truth anymore from Finn, because he encourages Finn to listen to the next message. And we see how good of a father Joshua is, because he didn't do this to defame or humiliate Finn, but to make him stronger. This is his way of saying that he loves Finn, as he even keeps a sword for him in that dungeon for him to use as he defeats the main monster. At the end of the episode, we see how both Jake and Finn respect, their father, calling him cool. And that's how the episode ends. And I just tell you how much I appreciated early Adventure Time, even though the later seasons of Adventure Time, it doesn't really drop in terms of quality, and it doesn't really drop in terms of my enjoyment of the show. I just feel like the earlier parts were just so innocent and much more endearing and much more true to its overall theme. But I'm not trying to defame or hate on the later seasons. I'm just saying I preferred the earlier seasons of Adventure Time, because it really displayed what the show really was about at its core. So yeah, man, this episode really depicted Joshua in a much more lighter way than other episodes could have ever done, because it really shows how much Joshua cares for his kids, even his step or adoptive kid in Finn, because we know Finn isn't actually his real son. But this man Joshua doesn't even mind. He doesn't even treat him like an adoptive son. He treats him like his real son, because I'm guessing similar to Jake, because we know Jake isn't his biological son either. We just see that Joshua doesn't care about blood. He doesn't care about like him being related to the kids. He just sees that bond. That bond is what matters more to him than the actual blood genetics of like being their father. He just cares more about them as children and them as his own kids, because it doesn't matter if he found one on the like outside or in the forest, or it doesn't matter that he had his brain literally implanted with one. He still loves them both equally as his own sons, you know what I'm saying? So it's just really cool. At first I didn't think this man Joshua would be like a good father, because from his first appearances we just thought he was this tough, you know, stern like figure who just didn't care that much about like people outside of his wife. But we see that he actually does care, and that he actually has his own way of showing love that isn't really understood by many. So yeah, man, Joshua is a really good character. He's a really good father as well, and he's really underrated, by the way. And it's sad that the dude like, you know, passed away and stuff, but he's still in their hearts at the end of the day. And yeah, man, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was a cool one, man. I have never done an Adventure Time video before, but I'm glad like Adventure Time is getting more attention now. A lot of people are doing videos on it. I'm not saying that I followed Wagon, but I'm just saying that, you know, I can see the hype. I can see why people do videos on Adventure Time, because the show is just so amazing, bro. Every time I watched the episode, I was just laughing, bro. People don't really talk about how comedic and like how funny this show actually is. They really talk about the adventures the characters go on, but they don't really dive into how funny this show actually is. I feel like it's up there with Amazing World of Gumball and a regular show, and still being comedic and like just funny and cartoony in its approach. So yeah man, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and that's it, man. That's all the fathers. I think this was a 3-part series. So I've already done Richard, I did Greg, and now this man Joshua. That's it, man. That's all the fathers that I can really think of, you know, that were like good fathers in Cartoon Network. I know I'm definitely forgetting a million more, but these three I just wanted to talk about and focus more on, just because, you know, these were the characters, or these were the shows that I grew up on: Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and Amazing World of Gumball. So I just felt like it would have been appropriate for me to speak on them and speak on those characters from those shows. So yeah, man, I hope you guys enjoyed the 3-parting series of exploring fathers in Cartoon Network. And yeah, man, please guys, comment down below on what you guys thought of each father that I have done on the channel. Do you guys love one father over the other? What did you think about Joshua? Please comment them down in the comment section down below. I would love to hear you guys' output on this. And yeah, man, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.